shall we start? Okay, so welcome everybody to our Trustworthy Data Science and AI seminar series at SFU. My name is Tianjing, and together with me are Professor Jian Pei and Professor Jian Wang, and we're organizing this seminar series. I think this has been the third season maybe, and today we're really happy to have Professor Tamer Özsu join us to give a talk about data science, like systematic approach to data science. I don't think I need a lot of introduction for Professor Özsu, but just a few words. So he's currently a university professor at the Sheraton School of Computer Science at the University of Waterloo. He was also previously the director of the school and associate dean of research for the faculty. He works on data engineering aspects of data science with a focus on distributed data management and management of unconventional data. I'm sure for anybody who works on distributed database systems, probably have read Tamer's book about it. That's a classic now. He's also a fellow of ACM IEEE and AAAS, as well as the Royal Society of Canada. He's also received numerous awards, for example, like Sigma Contribution Award, Test of Time Award, as well as the Lifetime Achievement Award from CSCAN, which is the kind of a Canadian Computer Science Association. He was also he's also the founding editor-in-chief of ACM Books through 2014 and 20, as well as the series editor for synthetic lecture on data management. I'm sure, again, many of us have read this series. It's very useful. So without further ado, I would like to let's welcome Professor Özsu again, and we very much look forward to the talk. So Tamer, please take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. When we were planning this talk, we were hoping, it was a faint hope, but we were hoping that we could do it in person, but as many things in the last 2.5 years, that plan went out the window. So here we are, and I'm nevertheless very happy to be here to talk about this topic. Most of my talks are usually deeply technical. This one is not going to be one of those. It's more the vision and perspective talk, if you want to call that. I have been over the last number of years involved in a number of data science projects and of mixed success. Some have been successful, some have not. And I've been thinking about this topic of how we should be approaching data science. And there are at least two reasons that I can think of why we should care about positioning data science properly. One is that there are lots of institutes, centers, even academic units being formed on data science. And in many cases, these do not follow specific vision of how they view data science, but they find crevices in their own institutions setting and kind of fit into those crevices. And I think I don't think that's the right way to go. I think each of these institutes and units need to have a solid understanding of what they mean by data science and be there. So here, this is going to be mine. The second thing is that there is a ongoing discussion as data science becomes increasingly important. There's an ongoing discussion as to whether data science is now an academic discipline. What is that academic discipline? I'm not going to go into that discussion, but my point is that if it is going to be an academic discipline, then we need to actually have a clear understanding and scoping of what that discipline is going to be. So hence, I think it is useful to talk about this topic. So the value of data is well understood now. I think it is all over the place. I cite some quotes here that you can actually see. So the data is really important. I said for those of us who are in the data management business, this is kind of obvious. It has been obvious to me for 50 years. I've been working on this in this field, but for many others, it is a new thing. It started early on with big data part and data driven, and then data science evolved from it. And you will see a lot of discussion of this topic in daily media, and the terms big data, data science, etc., are all intermixed, and that is an issue that I want to target. And it's not hard to find lots of comics even. So we're now even into the Dilbert world. So when you have Dilbert on data science, then you know that you probably made it. I also looked at the interest in data science in Google Trends, and I cheated a little bit in the following sense, because there is at least a terminological confusion. I took the terms big data, data science, data analytics, and looked at how those phrases are trending, and summed them up. And the top line here shows the sum, and clearly there is a significant interest. A few years ago, there was this word cloud that was made, and if you look at it, you will see the confusion. I think even in the definitions, we have this confusion of data mining, data science, machine learning, vision, and so on. And that, in my view, that needs to be clarified to a little bit. So what my objective tonight is, or today, is that I want to talk about some definitions and at least come to a working definition that I use. And then I want to look at some data science applications. You might be surprised why data science applications are discussed so early in the talk. That's because data science is all about applications, in my view. So that they're prominent, and I wanted to give you some examples of what can happen. And the most important part, and most of the time that I'll spend are on the next three areas, which is what is the ecosystem, what is the data science lifecycle, and what is an architecture for data science systems? How can we architect these things? And I'll end with a controversial topic of who owns data science, because that is really a significant amount of discussion. So I'm not going to read all of these, but there are multiple definitions of data science, both in academic circles and in companies. And this is a sampling of those definitions. And although the definitions are somewhat different, and they have weird phrases, I think Wikipedia definition starts out well, but then it basically ends by saying similar to data mining. Similar is very ill-defined, of course, but trying to even loosely equate data science with data mining is a mistake in my view. But the things that jump out on those definitions is that we're talking about data-driven decision making. We're talking about looking for and finding patterns in the data. We're trying the objective is to get some insights from the data and these from these patterns and use it for something. And the definitions also indicate that this is a process. It is not a one shot, you do something and happens. There is a process involved. So my working definition is this: it is a data-driven approach to problem solving by analyzing and exploring large volumes of possibly multimodal data, extracting from it knowledge and insight that is used for better decision making. So that's kind of my working definition of data science. And then the following sentence in my definition is, emphasize the process perspective, and that will come to the fore quite a bit when I talk about life cycle. It is the process of that starts from collecting data, preparing data, managing the data properly, analyzing the data, and explaining the data and the results. So that's basically the working definition that I will use. So as in that context, I see data science as a unifier, and it's a unifier in, you can look at this Venn diagram that I'm showing, either inside out or outside in. If you look at it inside out, then you're basically saying that, what I'm saying is that data science is unifying all of these disciplines. And if you look outside in, then it is the fact that these disciplines have an impact on data science. Now, there is a danger, and this is true for any discipline, that you want to be inclusive, but while you're trying to be inclusive, you don't want to be so wide that you don't have a core. And when you look at this Venn diagram, the first thing that should strike you is that this is inclusive, all right, but is it too broad? And my hope is that in the next section, when we look at what are the constituents of data science, we will we'll establish a core and bring this a little bit more clarity to this. There's, of course, the question that comes out when you talk about what is data science, when you want to define it. And the question that comes out is, who's a data scientist? Who makes a data scientist? And I'm going to leave that until the end. Let me talk about what I view as data science, and then I'll tell you how I think of who a data scientist is. And that differs from some of the things that you might have read or watched on YouTube, because there are lots of videos on YouTube on this. So there are two myths that I want to tackle first. One is that data science is big data. It is the same thing as big data. So in popular culture and in popular print, popular media, this equivalence is usually, or the difference is omitted, but they are really not the same thing. The best description I read somewhere is that big data is like raw material. It has a lot of potential, but you have to do something with that raw material, and doing something with that raw material is the processing it, which is part of data science, where you gain better understanding of what the data is modeling. And in that context, the applications are really important. If you don't have applications, you have big data and big data processing, but applications derive what you're looking for from the data. So I think this myth, at least for us, we need to clean this up. The second thing is this discussion, which happens almost in every computer science unit, which is, well, isn't data science a subset of machine learning, which is a subset of AI? Some claim that the modern AI is all machine learning, but I'm not going to go there. So but there is this notion that data science is really nothing more than machine learning. And if you really listen to a lot of conversation, you will see that when they talk about data scientists, they're talking about machine learning people and people who engineer machine learning tasks. I think this is fundamentally wrong. I think there is an overlap between data science and artificial intelligence to the extent that we use machine learning and data mining as part of the analytics, but and it's not even comprehensively all of the analytics. So they are related. They do have an overlap, but they're not the same thing. Data science has many other concerns that have nothing to do with AI, as I hope I will convince you today. And AI has a lot of concerns that go way beyond what data science worries about. So with that, let me talk about a few applications to give you a sense. The question typically comes up of what makes a good data science, what are good data science applications? The answer to that is actually fairly straightforward. If a domain is using very large data sets or generating large data sets, that it's a good candidate for being a data science application. Examples are many, and we could list quite a number of those, but I'll talk about a couple that jump at me. One is, of course, sustainability. This is probably one of the most important data science applications of the day, given the challenges we face around global environmental problems. And it covers a lot of ground, from climate variability and change to ecology to food, energy, and water concerns. The challenges are great, but the people who work in the area also know that there is a tremendous amount of data that comes in various forms: Earth observation data, remote sensing data, citizen science data, and so on. And the hope is that all of this data can be leveraged to better understand where we are and what the impacts of what our actions are, and answer what if type of questions, and decide where we go. Another application in this here is biological and biomedical. There is an explosion of data in this field, and a lot of interesting problems can be addressed by data. We all know that, and there is now quite a bit of research on what is called mathematical and computational medicine, which leads to more personalized medicine and so on. And these are again examples of data. A more everyday example is fraud detection, which is looking at fraud patterns in past data. In the examples that applications that I mentioned previously, we were looking at what we call data at rest. So we collect the data. Data is stationary. It changes. There is dynamicity, but fundamentally we take a snapshot and analyze it. In fraud detection, we're looking at real-time data. So what we call streaming data. Data is coming at a streaming rate, and we're trying to find patterns. Typically, here we use windowing, and we look at a certain amount of data and see if we can detect certain activities in that. And that's clearly a data science application, as is the next one, which is recommender systems. Again, this is really an important one. Netflix recommender system is valued at $1 billion a year, and Amazon recommender system is claimed to drive 20 to 35% lift in their sales. So commercially, these are important. And again, you're looking at both data at rest and data in action, which is transactional data, customers buying stuff and customers liking stuff and customers touching even item web pages and so on. And you're recommending things. So this is another application. So these are some of the applications, but there are many others. So let me get to the core of the topics that I want to talk about, which is the ecosystem. So this is really where we take that unifying view, which is probably way too inclusive, and bring it down to basically say, this is our core. This is, if we're going to have a discipline, this is the core of the discipline, and we should be covering these. Again, these are at first blush, these will look relatively broad to you, but I will bring it a little bit in to say that not everything in those topics are relevant, but certain things are in the data science. So to me, there are four building blocks of data science: data engineering, data analytics, data protection, and data ethics. And all four of these are equally important. And in most of our daily conversation, when people talk about a data scientist, they're really talking about the data analyst. That's the mental model that most people have. But all of these four fields have a significant impact on this field of data science, and I'll explain those. And these four building blocks are surrounded by applications, as I've argued. The applications both impact what these core technologies should be providing, and hopefully what we do in data science informs how we handle these applications. And also, all of these building blocks sit within the context of a social and policy context. None of the data science projects that I know of occur in a vacuum. They're very much influenced by the social context in which they take place. Certain things that we might be able to do in North America to data, we cannot do it in Europe. But we can do far more than any one of us can imagine in other parts of the world where there isn't that type of concern. So the social and policy context really influences what we can do in data science. So to me, this is the ecosystem. This is where we sit, and we need to worry about all of these four building blocks. So I'll take each of these and say a little bit and to expand. So the data engineering is the first one. Data engineering is everything that we do in data management, but not everything we do in data management. It is the things that we do relevant to this definition of data science. So to me, that consists of two things. One is big data management, data enrichment, data integration, data storage of and querying of very large volumes of data, maybe ETL or ELT processes. If we're doing data warehousing, maybe we're not doing any of those, but data lakes is the integration mechanism. And what are the underlying platforms that we use and I'll talk about those platforms, both hardware and software platforms, but in terms of the data, the managing the data. And the second thing is data preparation, which is the data acquisition, gathering, data cleaning, data provenance, data lineage, and so on. I put these two as 2 points in data engineering, but I don't mean to suggest that these are totally decoupled from each other. As you will see when we start talking about the processes, these will get entangled, and that's fine. I think I separate them just to make the discussion easier. When I gave these talks earlier, there was always a question: why is data engineering part of data science? And I think it is now not that big of a concern, because even we started reading publications which actually say you cannot do AI unless you do data engineering properly. So I think that's now becoming far more understood. But the fundamental reason is the very simple maxim that we all live with, which is garbage data, garbage results. So it really, if you don't do the data engineering part right, you're going to be the data that you put into your great model, super duper model, is going to be fairly ineffective, and the results that you get are going to be fairly unreliable. And data engineering really makes sure that this garbage data, garbage in, does not occur, or at least it's minimized as much as it is possible. So just one slide on what we mean by big data. There is no definition, but there was a NSF call for proposals some years ago on big data. This was that entire working group has now transformed into a data science group. So you have to really dig to find this solicitation there on the web. But it's basically, the definition is a better framing of what we all understand big data to be. But fundamentally, we use the 4 V's typically to identify big data. And I'm not going to say too much about this, but the volume, the variety, velocity, which is the streaming nature of some of the data, and the veracity, which is how well you can believe is an issue. I just call your attention to this leftmost figure at the number at the upper right corner of that figure. That's 175 zettabytes is what is expected in the next few years. And that's really very, very high number. Even for database folks like myself, it is a challenging volume to deal with. But the management of this data is an issue. Data preparation is typically seen as a workflow, which starts with data acquisition. We need to find the data sources that are appropriate for the problem. We select a certain set of those data for the problem. We typically integrate, but that integrate I should put in quotes because it could mean different things, as I'll discuss a little bit in this case of data science. And then we have to deal with the data quality problem. So that's the data preparation pipeline. At the end of this, you get this hopefully minimally the junk in the data is minimized, and you can use it for proper analysis. There are multiple ways of data integration. The classical way in this case, since you're getting the data from big data sources, and the data is multimodal. By multimodal, what I mean is that it's structured data, unstructured data, graphs, tweets, social media stuff, text, a lot of text, and so on. You're not going to have a single store. Typically, what you do is that you might have a federated data store that deals with this multimodality of it, and that's getting the transactional data. But more importantly, traditionally, what we do is that we take these data and put it through an ETL, which is extract, transform, load. So you extract the data from these sources, transform it to the schema of the target, and then load it to the data warehouse. The modern twist to that is ELT, which is extract, load, and then transform. So you basically do the transform after you're loading. And this is the data warehouse approach. And then you migrate historical data from your transactional store to this data warehouse. And then both of them feed into the downstream tasks that we'll talk about. And this is traditionally what happens. But more recently, that there is this notion of data lakes. And the difference is that data warehouses we call a schema on write. So as you're putting data into the data warehouse, you make sure that the data fits the schema. And data lakes are called schema on read, which is that you don't care, you just more or less dump the data into this integrated store, and you worry about the schema when you're reading or when you're doing it. So it is in this arrow where it goes to the downstream tasks that you have to actually give a shape to the data so that it can be used. So there are these two alternatives. And data integrate, the data lakes are definition is given here, which is massive collection of data sets. Well, data warehouses are that too, but there is a federation here, so it's not physically single store. It might be distributed, and they might have different formats. And some might have metadata, what I call schema. Some may not have metadata. and they may change autonomously over time. Most of the literature, when you read it, will say that the data lake is a single store, but it doesn't have to be a single store. So the differences between these and from a data engineering perspective are what you would expect. The data warehouse is simple to architect because you have a well-defined schema and it's a single store. It's centralized. We do centralized analytics on it, so the analytics algorithms don't have to worry. But there is now a growing concern that these create privacy concerns about the data being centralized like this. On the other hand, we basically deal with distributed data, sometimes autonomous, but we can do what is really popular now, which is federated or distributed analytics, or this in the machine learning world, this has become quite a popular topic to study, and those seem to reduce the privacy concerns. So all of these make the data engineering part of data science. Of course, whenever you integrate, you have data quality issues. I think the literature is full of discussions of how big a portion of the business world worries about the quality of that they deal with, and there are all kinds of, again, comics that go around that talk about what these data quality issues are. The data quality, we mostly talk about data cleaning, but the definition, which is this DAMA UK, is Data Management Association in UK. They've defined these 6 dimensions. Actually, originally it was 6, and then it grew to 150, as these things typically do when you get committees involved, and then they distilled it to 15. But these 6 probably give a good idea of what the dimensions of data quality are. And an important part of this data quality, and even going into the privacy concerns that I'll talk about later on, is data provenance, where the data is coming from, trustworthiness of the data sources, etc., play a significant role. The second part of the data science ecosystem is data analytics, which is really the use of statistical and machine learning techniques to draw insights from data under study. And you make predictions, hopefully the predictions about the behavior of the system under study. Again, I'll come back to this at the very end, but just as a teaser, this is a discussion between statisticians and computer scientists, especially data mining, machine learning people, as to who's really doing data analytics properly on big data. This distinction is not that important, or is probably disappearing. There's a paper by actually they are by 3 who are not really computer scientists. They're biologists. They basically argue that the statisticians typically deal with smaller data sets. They try to build a model, and they deal with a limited number of attributes. If your number of attributes really grow large and you're trying to make big predictions, then you're in the machine learning world. So take it for whatever it is worth. But the types of data analytics are typically 4. And the diagram on the right shows the increasing complexity along the x-axis and the presumed value along the y-axis. So the close to the left corner is descriptive, which is really looking at past data and trying to decide what is happening. What does the data tell us about what is happening? And this exploratory analysis is part of this as well. You may not have a direct question or clearly formed question, but you're exploring data and then you're refining your question as you go along. The next one is diagnostic. Again, you're looking, it's backward looking, it's looking at past data, but not only are you trying to say what is happening, you're trying to detect why it is happening. So you're trying to diagnose the reason for whatever is happening in the system and what the data suggests about the reasons. Then you move into predictive. Predictive is not retrospective. Predictive is looking forward, and it typically uses machine learning, data mining, and predictive modeling techniques to determine what is likely to happen, and how are the decisions going to be affected by what is likely to be to happen. And finally, prescriptive, which is again forward-looking, but it builds on predictive to basically say, this is what you should do. So I am going to recommend certain actions for you. And the argument is that it gets more complex as you move from descriptive to prescriptive, but the value of the analysis also increases as you go there. And all of these are valid within the context of data science. When we look at data analysis texts and methods, there are typically 6 that we can identify. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but clustering is one, which is finding groups and structures that are similar in some definition of similarity. Outlier detection is another one, finding anomalies and rare items. Fraud detection is a good example of outlier detection. Association rule mining, which is finding relations between variables. Market basket analysis is a good example of this. Classification, which is really generalizing a known structure to new data, so that you can take the new data and classify it in one of the groups that you have defined. Regression is a model that best fits the data that you have. And finally, summarization, which is a more compact representation of the data set, and typically visualization. And that actually shows you, gives you a significant amount of insight and what is going on. So if we link these to the previous slide, then typically clustering, association rule mining, and summarization techniques are used for descriptive analysis, while classification, regression, and outlier detection are suitable for predictive analysis. Within this context, we should talk about the analytics architectures. If you're really integrating the data and you have an integrated data store, then you're typically doing batch analysis on this one. So you do analytics, whatever analytics problem or formulation you have on this data, and it's batched. And if the data changes, you can come back and do it incrementally, but it is basically a batch process. There is this new area, which is federated analysis, where if the data is not integrated, but it's in a federated form, then you can push the analysis into the sources where the data resides and do the analysis there. And the common perception now is that this has advantages in terms of data privacy. And finally, there is the real-time analytics. So if you have streaming data that's coming into your system, then you don't really have time to create these data stores. You can have at best a real-time data store, which is really a very lightweight main memory type of data store, and you do transactional analysis on this one, real-time analysis, to provide real-time analysis results. So that's the second part of the ecosystem. The third part of the ecosystem is data protection. Data protection becomes a really big issue, and this is really, data protection is the more general term for what is called typically security and privacy, This becomes a really big issue in data science simply because of the big data problem that you're collecting, possibly integrating, possibly federating all of this data. And there are far more surface for attacks in this kind of an environment. And that you really need to worry about. So when you look at the dimensions of data protection, there is, of course, the privacy and the security dimensions. And the privacy deals with the proper handling, processing, storage, and usage of information. Security deals with the protecting the information from any unauthorized access and malicious attacks. And these come in various different concerns, from policies, privacy policies, to privacy enhancing technologies, third-party management, and data subject access request management, and so on. On the other hand, encryption is the stuff that we all deal with. In particular, here you might have to be dealing with encrypted data, or at least or posing encrypted queries over encrypted or unencrypted data. So homomorphic encryption is quite popular there. TEEs are trusted execution environments that are now appearing in hardware for being able to do it, and so on. So the title is data protection, and we talk about data privacy, and we talk about data security, but the nature of these change a little bit when you go from classical or traditional security privacy concerns to data security and privacy concerns in data science. And what comes to the fore are the bigger privacy concerns, and also the veracity of it. So how do you deal with misinformation and so on? And those come to the fore. When you look at the type of threats, the threat surface is, again, as I said, quite broad, and you deal with data breaches, surveillance, misinformation, and infrastructure attacks. So really, the threats are across the entire spectrum, and because it's on the entire spectrum, people have actually started saying, well, we really don't want to talk about data protection. We're moving into cybersecurity, which is that the entire system at all levels need to be protected. So you need to be protecting your platform, you need to be protecting your network, you need to be protecting your software, you need to be protecting your data. And all of these play into data science. There is significant amount of issue there. And this Cloud Secure Alliance, CSA, they made recommendations on the type of things that we should be worrying about in terms of data protection in data science applications or big data applications. And I've listed them here. They go from infrastructure security to data privacy, to data, the integrity of data, the data management issues, both in the data and the transaction logs, and data provenance appears quite a bit here, and reactive security, which is basically coming back and being able to do audit. The fourth and final building block of data science is data ethics. This is a topic that is very, very rich, and it is studied in different areas. This is a definition from philosophy, to the sources philosophy. It says it's the branch of ethics that studies and evaluates moral problems related to data, algorithms, corresponding corresponding policies. So if you what that definition gives you are three dimensions of the problem that we need to consider. We need to consider ethics of data, ethics of algorithms, and ethics of practices. What we have done mostly in the space, more in the STEM world, is to worry about bias. And there's a lot of work that is on bias, and the bias is kind of a systematically distortion of the statistical result. That's what happens. And psychologists indicate that the bias is inherent in human decision making for three reasons. One is that humans want accuracy, which is the correct decision making. We want speed. We want to make the decisions fast, and we want efficiency. When we're considering a decision, the space of alternatives is too large, so we want to actually narrow that space of alternatives, and those three are main reasons why bias occurs. And the type of bias that psychologists identify in humans fall into these four categories. I've highlighted in red the ones that typically come up in data science applications. Overconfidence in our ability to, which is action-oriented bias. We know what we're doing. Anchoring effect. Mentally, we are at a space, we're at a particular place, and where we are at affects what alternatives we're willing to consider. Confirmation bias is really quite well known. It is, the confirmation bias is one where we say, I have a hypothesis and I'm going to focus on the data that confirms my hypothesis. And I'll say, well, see, the data actually tells me that what I was claiming is right. And then the social biases, which appears mostly in this context of data science as groupthink or going along, that we don't want to rock the boat and go with it. So when you look at this in the biases in data science, there is bias in data. One of the for example, machine learning deployments. This is the bias in the training data. It could be introduced by historical or representational bias. So, for example, in US, if you look at arrest records, you will see that the records indicate more arrests in marginalized communities. So therefore, that actually leads to certain results, and it's the arrests are more in marginalized communities, typically because they are over-policed, and that is an issue. So historically, more of them show up in the data. Bias might also be introduced due to underrepresentation. We all know the story probably about Google doing the initial filtering of applicant CVs, and that they had to scrap because they were using a system that relied on the data, and women were not represented sufficiently in that data, and that became an issue. The other issue is the bias in algorithms or models. So, the certain individual attributes are commonly labeled as protected attributes because they can be sources of social bias, and such as race, religion, etc., etc. And one needs to be really careful about that. There are stories that I've quoted here, which basically indicate that the bias in the inclusion or omission of these certain features in the model itself or in the algorithms lead to biases. But I talked about bias, but bias is not the only part of ethics. I highlighted bias because that's what we spent a lot of our time on. And since we're in Canada, I cannot. Most of our work has been actually on gender bias. We talk about marginalized communities, but in Canada, for example, there is a significant bias against First Nations, et cetera, in a lot of our data collections. And those need to be brought and considered carefully as well. And the unmeasurable outcomes. The typical example that's given is that when we're admitting grad students, we try to determine who would make a good grad student. And since we cannot know, we use GRE scores as a proxy for success. And GRE scores are known to be really bad determinants of PhD student success. So, you know, the number of places, including us, are giving up on GREs, but that's another issue. When you broaden the scope to more ethics of data, then you have a lot of these other issues that you need to deal with. The ownership of the data, who has ownership, and you will notice that some of these cross over to privacy concerns. The transparency, what are you going to do with my data? I need to know, and I need to consent. The privacy of the identified information, and the intention. For what purpose are you collecting the data? And you're not going to use it for any purpose other than that. Those are all ethical concerns on data. I cannot say that we do a very good job in our training of grad students on the ethics issues too well. Berkeley Big Data Group has released a checklist that I suggest you might want to take a look at. It's pretty nice. So what I wanted to do is, this is a bit long-winded discussion, but I wanted to bring that broad perspective down to some size and say, this is the core. And these are the the core issues that we need to deal with in data science. Let me talk about life cycle. You know, many of us probably know this data life cycle. Data life cycle for some of us go back a couple of decades, but this is from a paper that's fairly recent. I picked that one up because it summarizes it fairly nicely. Data has a life cycle. It starts when we acquire the data, we clean the data, we do something with the data or reuse it multiple times. We publish, where we share the data, and then we preserve the data for some time and then destroy it. This is typically called the data life cycle. And there have been a number of variations of this that have appeared in different contexts over years. Some actually predate this particular figure, but nevertheless, it is variations on this theme. The way that I look at the problem with this type of dealing with a life cycle is that it's linear. It gives the impression that you start from here, you follow these steps, and then you're at the end. But I think many of us know that this is not the life cycle of data. We keep going around in a loop and repeating it. So there is an alternative model, crisp data mining model that the data mining folks have developed about 20 years ago, that is still quite popular according to recent studies. And there is what is called the PPDAC model, which is really a statistical model. It's the same thing. The PPDAC is the names the names of the phases, and I like that a little better. So this is my view of data lifecycle based on which is similar to the CRISP, DM, and PPDAC model. It goes in a cycle. It starts with a research question, which is really the problem definition. Everything starts with a problem definition. If you're for an application, this is where you define application requirements. Then you do the data preparation, which is collecting data, data set selection, data ingest, data quality issues, data provenance issues. Then you store the data for integrated and etc. And then you do the analysis, and then you do the deployment, which is the dissemination of results. And then when you do deployment, this last bit, going back to the research question, is where you monitor, and you repeat this process multiple times. And all of this life cycle is surrounded by the data security and privacy and data ethics and social policy issues. They all influence it. So this is more or less the process, but I see the process more as a cycle. And these data security and privacy and data ethics, social policy issues have overlaps with each of these boxes. So I'll show some of the questions that come up when you take data security with each of these boxes. So what happens there, and in each of those boxes that when you consider what kind of security and privacy concerns you have. The final thing that I'll tell, and so this process is important. And the final thing that I will say that here is that there is a fault in this type of circular models as well, in the sense that it gives the appearance that when you deploy, you monitor, and you come back and you refine the research question, you're back to where you started. It's of course not true. There is kind of a dialectic process here that you come to a better understanding, and you're hopefully improving your understanding as you go. And the more really important issue is that although we have these boxes of the processes, each of those have their own problems, what happens at the interfaces is probably more important than what happens in the boxes, or at least just equally important. So we should never lose sight of this interaction between those. Let me talk about architecture very quickly. I will summarize this beginning part. This is from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US. This is a fairly nice model. I think the important part of this model is that it separates the big data framework provider from the application provider. And basically, the application provider is really the process. So this is the life cycle, life cycle management, from ingesting the data to preparing analytics, visualization, and providing access to the data consumers. And the big data framework provider provides the underlying infrastructure for this. And these are organized along two dimensions. One is the management fabric. How do you manage this entire the stack? And the other one is the security privacy fabric. This architecture has made an impact. And here is one that I'm showing where somebody modified it. Some researchers modified it for really a data science applications in the national security domain. So it does have an impact. This is not the only architecture, but there are some. But for me, when I actually looked at that, I said, okay, this is a good reference architecture, which tells us what type of things we should worry about, but what is a really concrete software stack. So if I want to build a system, what do I need to do? And this is what I came up with. These systems, because of this big data context, they are going to be scale-out systems. And because they are going to be scale-out systems, we have a computing infrastructure, which is a scale-out computing infrastructure. Then we have a system platform, which is really distributed data storage, how do we manage these. And then we have a processing platform, which is both dealing with data in motion, streaming data, and data at rest, with perhaps some common interface, and then an application platform, which is my workflow. Because this is a scale-out system, I need resource management, and the privacy security technologies cross over all of these. This seems to me to be a reasonable stuff. And there is, if this is mapped to the cloud, there is a standard mapping. I think system platform computing infrastructure together is platform as a service, and then you can go up the stack. And there is a lot of work that is done in individual pieces of this. There are lots of systems that people have built, and the typical way that people build these stacks now is by gluing these together. There is no monolithic architecture, and there may not be ever a monolithic architecture like the one that we're used to. So and there's another view of architecture that some people have espoused, which really says, well, we have two types of data in motion, data at rest. So why don't we track what we do to those two different types of data? And this basically shows that there is this batch processing side, there is the streaming data processing with real-time analytics and batch analytics, and sometimes you do combined analytics. So that's another view. Let me end quickly with a discussion of who owns data science. The one on the right is statisticians' view of computer scientists. And actually, if you look, I've read quite a bit, and statisticians have been arguing, to a certain extent, rightfully, that they've been doing data science all along. But what they've been doing all along is data analytics. And if you accept my view of what data science scoping is, they're only dealing with one component of it. They're not dealing with everything. So one thing that you might have seen is this view, which is the very well-known Conway diagram. This is very popular among statisticians. It's cited. And the Conway diagram, if you look at that, you will actually see that there is no role for computer science. And he actually, in the accompanying blog posts, he says that, and I'm going to quote, he says, "This does not require a background in computer science. In fact, many of the most impressive hackers I have met never took a single CS course. Being able to manipulate text files at the command line, understanding vectorized operations, thinking algorithmically, these are the hacking skills that make for a successful data hacker." So all you need is data hacking. You need a lot of statistics and math, and where they meet, put together with the substantive expertise is domain knowledge, is data science, and that's basically this is a popular diagram. Of course, when you have that diagram, there's a counter diagram. Actually, there is a very interesting. If you search for it, I think it's called the Battle of Venn diagrams. It's in KD Nuggets. There are zillions of these Venn diagrams that people have drawn. It makes for a fun reading. Not, I don't take it too seriously, but Ullman actually wrote this, and he basically says, well, machine learning is all computer science. It's nothing new. And yeah, you need a little bit of stats and math. Math is important, stats is important, but it's really the intersection of computer science and domain science is where data science is. And even machine learning is only part of data science. That's his view. And of course, I told you about the CS internal view, which says, it's all AI. AI encompasses ML, and ML encompasses DS. So it's AI, and we're done. So let's leave that aside since I dealt with it. So we're left with these two conflicting views. To me, neither of these actually make much sense, to be honest. I don't actually subscribe to either of these. Even the question of who owns data science is a weird question to me. But so the question that I would ask is, who are the constituents? Who play in this sandbox? And who are the stakeholders? There are three that I can identify. There is a group of core technology people like me, people like Jian, and all the other colleagues who do the technology development. There's a whole group of application colleagues who do not do technology development, but they're actually either in STEM or in social sciences or in humanities. Digital humanities is a big thing, who are involved in data science applications in some domain, but they want to use the technology that the first group develops. And then there is a third group, which really is worried about the ethics, the social impact of data science, how this plays out in the society, and what the policy dimensions are. So those are the three stakeholders. And if we have to use a Venn diagram, I still like my Venn diagram better than any of these. I think it is worthwhile to be inclusive while establishing that core. So who's a data scientist? This is my last bit that I promised. So in my view, given the core that I described, what are the core competencies? One should be an expert in either data engineering or data analytics. You need to be, you can be in data science, but you need to be in one of those cores. You need to have a working knowledge of the other three pillars. So you need to understand what data, what the data protection issues are, what the data ethics issues are, and so on. And hopefully you have knowledge of multiple applications domains, but at least one. And you need to be able to work in a team, because data science is never done alone. It's always a team effort. And that's what I consider to be a data scientist, at least from the STEM perspective. So, final thoughts. If we're going to make this a discipline, we need to have a disciplined approach to scoping it. And this is my attempt. And it is multidisciplinary field. It is multifaceted, and we need to recognize that while defining our core. The view I presented is really from a STEM perspective, probably even predominantly computer science perspective. There is a rich social science, humanities literature on data science that I've started reading, but I don't have expertise to talk about it, so I'm not going to go there. So with that, thank you. I think I've exceeded my welcome, but I apologize. I can never time this talk well.
All right, thank you, Tamer, for the very interesting and comprehensive talk. So now we're open for questions. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can also type into the chat window. Then I will read the question for you.
Okay, Tamer, Mohan here.
I was expecting you to ask something, Mohan. You're breaking up, Mohan.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I am?
Yeah,
now you're
okay
good.
now.
Okay now?
You're
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Quite curious.
Sorry, I think you're breaking out again.
Oh, I don't know what to do.
Now it's good.
Now it's good?
Good.
Yeah, don't get too close. Maybe that's what's this.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Good that way. Okay. There was a Sigma panel where there was all this discussion, and I've also heard it in other places, where people said, first of all, we database people are not part of the picture in a way where the rest of computer science doesn't take over. And then there was even a discussion saying computer science people are not even holding on to this topic. Non-computer scientists are taking over, and that has a lot of ramifications on who starts new courses that degree in data science, and also where the funding goes from different funding.
Yeah.
So for any such, it's important for us to take ownership of this. And in fact, in Seattle, there was this 2018, I think. Anhai gave a talk for 5 years, people scratching their head and what should we focus on. There he gave this presentation where he talked about how quite a while ago, decades ago, statisticians were finding it hard to figure out what their role in society was, because they found that they were concentrating too much on theoretical stuff, and the real world was moving on, and people were being left behind. So they felt that they didn't have a place that they could claim as their own. And the question was, are we becoming like that?
Okay, so I think I got the gist of your question when you were breaking up again, but I think the issue, I honestly, I included that last section in the talk, who owns, just to emphasize the point that nobody owns. I mean, it's if by owning you mean this is our domain, you are an outsider. It's very hard to do that in this domain. So when you're setting up a data science program, you make a decision. So my unit, computer science, is within the Faculty of Mathematics, and we have a graduate program in data science, but it's a joint program between computer science, statistics, combinatorics and optimization, and to a certain extent, applied mathematics departments. So, and there is a governing committee that I sit on, consisting of these, and we recognize from the beginning that this is an interdisciplinary. Even when you take a very mathematically oriented perspective on data science. I mean, we don't do social science aspects of data science. We don't even do ethics properly in our program. But even when you take a very STEM-oriented approach to data science, it is multidisciplinary. I think what will happen if we keep fighting who owns this is that this will not become a discipline. I think we should define what the scoping of the discipline is. And I presented one view. I'm sure others might present other views, and then experiment around those views, but in an interdisciplinary way. And there are different models people have used to form units. The extreme case is Berkeley, which basically set up a college of data science and put computer science and everybody inside that college. But there are other models. Virginia is a school of data science, which has faculty lines that it semi-controls, but it doesn't actually hire the people. It kind of shares it with other units. So I have a data science position. If we both agree on the person, computer science, we can actually hire this person, and we will be funding it, kind of stuff. So there are different models in academic world for setting it. But I think ownership conversation. The only reason I included it is to be able to emphasize that it makes no sense.
I think more than ownership, the point might have been who takes leadership, that sort of thing, you know, who drives it more than completely owning it.
And an interdisciplinary group.
No, remember decades ago, Dave Dewitt gave that keynote at TLDB saying, database people are roadkill on the information superhighway because we let the operating systems and such people take over how web data gets managed, and we didn't hurry up enough.
I probably have a less partisan view of those discussions than might have been expressed there. I think eventually things, once the big buzz disappears, things settle down and people have a more reflective perspective view of what is going on and how to define the discipline.
Hello, Professor Tamer.
Hello.
Hi, I have a question. As a fourth-year computer science student, if I want to transition to this data science field in the future, like I still maybe just have a couple courses left to graduate, like what do you suggest? Should I take more like maybe stats courses, or maybe machine learning courses, or maybe math courses to just focus on this field a bit more?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you've taken so far and where you are, but you should be taking courses in at least the first two groups that I mentioned, which and have some appreciation of the data protection aspects as well. I think machine learning courses, if you haven't taken any, you definitely should be taking machine learning data mining courses. There is no question. If you have a chance to take some continuous optimization courses, which is from mathematics, those are very relevant as part of that analytics domain. If you haven't taken any data engineering courses on the other side, at least some modern data management concepts, then you might want to consider it. Depends on depends on how you've shaped your courses up until now, where the gaps are.
Okay, I see. Just one more question. Like since like as a data engineer or data analyst, like should we like focus a bit more on like the stats background? Like should we actually strengthen the stats background?
Well, I think you're asking as someone who always believed that a strong stats and a strong optimization background are critical in computer science. We don't do enough of those, perhaps, but yes, the standard answer you'll get from me is yes. But that's a standard answer for any computer science student, to be frank. I think computer science students should be getting considerable amount of statistics, and because we deal with data, and in the final analysis, whether you do data science, whether you do something else, you'll be looking at data, you'll be trying to make inferences from data. And when something makes statistical sense, when it doesn't, it requires some knowledge of what you can do to data, what you cannot do to data, and that comes from statistics courses. So I believe every computer science student should be doing that.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you, Professor.
I think there's a question from Zoom, which is sent directly to me and Tamer, I think. So this is from Hua from Victoria University in Australia. The question is it possible to have a bit more information about data science applications in Recycle Bin? I can see there's one slide about this part in the talk. I think this was referring to one of the earlier slides.
The question is on more information about applications?
Data science applications in Recycle Bin, I think, or Hua, do you want to maybe clarify a little bit?
I'm not sure what the Recycle Bin reference is. That's
I think it's one of the earlier like garbage in, garbage out part, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean
that's right?
You mean the unsuccessful applications? Is that the question?
That was to say garbage in, garbage out. It wasn't an application.
It wasn't an application. It actually basically says if you don't do data engineering right, you're not going to get data analytics right. That was the message.
Okay, thanks.
I've been writing a paper on this off and on, and I think I'm almost done. And it started with from a paper that I thought I might send to Communications of ACM, but now it is about 50 pages, so it's not going to Communications of ACM. So I might extract something, but that paper in that form has far more on applications where I get the text from colleagues who are in those domains. So hopefully that will have a bit more on applications.
So Amir, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So sorry, my question is somehow basic, but I was eager to ask. In the data analytics, is it correct to say that some tasks may be complement of each other? For example, when we do clustering in a data set, after finishing clustering, we have somehow identified rare data samples, or for example, clusters with a size that is very, very few in comparison with other clusters might be the rare samples or rare data samples.
Absolutely. I think when I did that classification, if I gave the impression that in a particular data science application, you pick one of those analytics tasks and that's it. I didn't mean to say that. Actually, picking the right data analytics task for the particular application you're considering, or the combinations of those tasks, which ones are suitable, are appropriate, is part of the big data analytics challenge. That comes with expertise. That's why some people are better at this, that we should try this and then we should try that. So yes, combinations definitely are suitable, and which combinations and when and how to do, where to start, is part of this this art of building these applications that comes with experience.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Hi, Tamer, may I have one question?
Sure.
So just imagine if we walk into 3 schools, School of Computer Science, School of Statistics, and School of Data Science. Hypothetically, let's say we have 3 schools. What would you say the feeling and the culture, what would be the difference?
Okay, well, I mean, it's it differs. That's a good question, actually. I think the first order approximation is that in the computer science, we care more about the computation aspects. So how do we compute this, and whether this is computable, and so on. And to a certain extent, we don't actually get terribly bothered by complexity that much, at least in many domains. We've learned to live with approximations, and we always make trade-offs between efficiency and effectiveness. So that doesn't come too much. If you walk into a statistics department, which is really more mathematical statistics, that they will worry far more about the effectiveness and accuracy of the model, and so on, and then probably less willing to accept the approximations. Although approximations are inherently in that discipline, but they're probably more bothered by it than we would be bothered by it. But it also depends, really, what I was going to say is it also depends a lot on what type of statistics department and what type of computer science department you have. I mean, at Waterloo, we're very used to seeing our undergrad students take far more math courses than typical computer science undergrads elsewhere. So we do expect them to be able to be more proficient mathematically. So when we drop them into a statistics course, we do expect them to be able to handle it a bit. I mean, they do struggle, of course, but at least we have the expectation that they have the maturity to be able to handle those. So it really what the CS culture is determines what the CS reaction is going to be to the field as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question from chat. This is asking, like, may you share some advice to us from your failed applications?
Well, my favorite application probably changes a bit, but really the favorite, I think the application that really fascinates me right now is sustainability, because the challenges are so great and the data sources are so rich that I think there is a lot of work we can do there, and I'm trying to learn more about that. But the thing here is that there are many fields where you can find these problems. In a totally different part of my research, I work on graph processing and streaming graph processing, and that is entirely about. You can think the motivating example we use there is kind of Amazon, Alibaba, and so on, web commerce, because there in high rates the data arrival rates are so high that it makes for a very interesting problem. And so we worry about the graphs between persons and items, and so bipartite graphs, and these every time a person touches an item, comments, recommends an item or comments on an item or buys an item that's an edge in the graph. And we look at that and basically try to do analytics over that. So that's, my favorite application in that line of my research is really recommender systems and so on. But I cannot say that I have one. I think I can say more. If the other thing, I haven't shown it here, but I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Moneyball. You might have seen that. If you haven't, find that movie. It's now getting a bit, I think, about 15, 20 years old. But Moneyball is about Oakland Athletics baseball club, who was the first to use data analytics and actually data science, because they didn't have enough money. So they couldn't just go out and buy good players. They had to actually use data analytics to determine how different players they find would complement each other to form a group. And they lost the World Series that year by a whisker. They lost it to New York Yankees, who had 10 times the salary bill of these guys. And the entire movie is about data science in sports. So there are many interesting, really interesting application domains.
Yeah, I think so this question is from Gary. I think you have a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think another question. I really enjoyed the presentation of Professor Özsu. I'm an engineer. My question here is, what's your comment on situations that we do not have a lot of data? We have actually very few data. Like when we do engineering design, the product is not there yet. And we only do simulation to try to see what's going on. So the data is scarce. In that case, so what's your recommendation to apply data science?
Yeah, I think that's a field that I don't know very well, but it's an emerging field, which is basically trying to do this type of analysis or approach with limited data. Mm-hmm. I think the type of analytics that we do is probably going to be less. Well, I mean, when you do simulation, if you don't have enough data to draw patterns from, what you typically do is you pay more attention to the model. You try to get the model to be a faithful as possible representation of the system that you're simulating, right? I think that is really what you do, and that's what we typically did in computer science. In a lot of our simulation experiments, what I used to tell students is that your simulation needs to be as close to the analytic model as you can get, because that's the only way that you're going to test. It doesn't have to be the identical, but it has to be close to what the system is supposed to be doing. Yeah. So that's an approach to do.
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe just another question is, I really appreciate, is you at the beginning you said you had some failed applications. So maybe you can shed some light and to give some advice. Now, when we do applied data science, what are things to watch to prevent from
yeah, well, I think that's a good question. I don't think I don't remember I said failed applications, because I'm not the right person to be doing it, because I have not. I see what you're referring to. It's not the failed applications of data science. It is failed applications to establish data science initiatives, like institutes and so on. I tried a number of those, and some of them were not successful. That's what I meant. The application. I think there is a rich literature that I don't know well about best practices in building data science applications. How do you build data science applications, and what are the best practices in building data science applications, right, and what you should be paying attention to? But I don't know that literature very well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any final kind of questions Okay, so if not, then let's thank Professor Tamer Özsu again. And really great talk, and appreciate your time here. I think it's pretty late now in the East. So just one final announcement that we still have one talk, at least in the summer, which is in May 25th. And again, as usual, it's going to be on our website. And this talk will have Gerhard Wickham to talk to us about knowledge graph, which is also interesting, and we look forward to having you here again in May. So with that, I think let's call it a day, and thank you very much for everyone to come.
Thank you.